I never imagined my life could turn upside down like this. Here in our small town, where everyone knows each other, I was always Lucas, the son of the respected Charles, a man whom everyone admired. I grew up believing my family was like any other, imperfect, yet honest, until I discovered the truth about my father and Juliana, my childhood friend, the same Juliana who used to play with me in my parents' backyard. How could he? How could she? But now, after so much pain and so many tears shed, I've decided I will no longer remain silent. This story needs to come to light. The truth came through an anonymous email that brought my world crashing down in seconds. The cold letters on the screen revealed the unthinkable. My father, Charles, had another child with Juliana, my childhood friend, the same one who shared secrets with me decades ago. I felt my body go numb as my eyes scanned each word, my breath faltering between pain and shock. How could there be another child? A brother I had never known existed. The lies piled up like layers of betrayal, each line of the text tearing pieces of innocence from me. In that moment, I realized my life would never be the same. The overwhelming pain from the anonymous email transformed into a storm inside me. My body trembled, not from fear, but from a rage that surpassed any emotion I had ever felt. How could a brother I knew nothing about exist? A child that my own father sired with Juliana, the one I once called a friend? Fragmented memories began to surface. Moments of seemingly shared complicity, smiles exchanged, secrets kept. Everything felt like a grand lie now. My family structure, once so solid, crumbled like a house of fragile cards. I spent hours staring at the screen, trying to decipher each word, each detail of the email. My mind whirled in a carousel of unanswered questions. How old was this boy? Where did he live? What was his life like? And most importantly, why did my father keep me in the dark for so long? The initial vulnerability was quickly replaced by surgical rage. I would no longer be the good son who swallowed whatever was thrown my way. Every lie would be exposed, every secret brought to light. My father needed to understand that his actions would not go unpunished. Do you think you can build a life of lies and I'll stay quiet? I whispered to myself, feeling a different energy fill me. I was no longer the submissive Lucas. I was someone ready to dismantle the entire family theater. Juliana, my ex-friend, how could she betray me like this? Years of companionship, confidences shared in the backyard, and it was all a grand act. Her silence was as guilty as my father's. The pain began to transform into fuel. Every tear I shed turned into determination. I would no longer be the victim. I would be the one responsible for bringing the truth to light. My family needed to understand that secrets always find a way out. I decided I would be surgical in my approach. I wouldn't act on impulse, but with a calculated strategy. Every move would be thought out. Every word would be a weapon. My father and Juliana would learn that lies have short legs, and I would be the messenger of that lesson. The initial shock gave way to disturbing clarity. I would not only expose the truth, but I would also rebuild my story. No victimhood, no fear. A new version of myself was being born, forged in pain but absolutely unstoppable. The investigation became my new obsession. Every detail, every silent moment now took on new meanings. I began to collect evidence with almost surgical precision, turning my pain into fuel for uncovering the truth. My meetings with Charles turned into true silent battlefields. Every question was a wedge I inserted into the cracks of his false narrative. I watched how he averted his gaze, how his hands trembled slightly when I touched on sensitive points. I was no longer the submissive son accepting crumbs of explanation. With Juliana, our dialogues were even tenser. Our encounters, once marked by childhood complicity, were now strategic and calculated. Every word was ammunition, every silence, a confession. I subtly provoked her, making it clear I knew the truth but wanted to hear it from her own lips. Details began to emerge like fragments of a twisted puzzle. A photo here, a comment there, documents discreetly stored away. I realized my family was an elaborate theater of lies, where each character played a carefully constructed role. The most interesting thing was realizing how this investigation transformed me. Each revelation did not destroy me but rebuilt me. The initial pain was replaced by an unrelenting energy for justice. I would no longer be the passive victim of a story that had been hidden from me. Charles tried to calm me down with weak arguments, typical of someone who always believed he could manipulate the facts. "Son, "Not everything is as it seems," he would say, with that authoritative voice that once intimidated me. Today, those words felt like a joke. I had become the hunter of truths, no longer the prey of his manipulations. Juliana, in turn, oscillated between fear and guilt. Our encounters became a tense dance, where every movement revealed more than words. Her silence screamed louder than any confession. The small town, once my sanctuary of safety, now seemed like a stage where I was preparing my grand revelation. All secrets, all lies would be exposed, not out of revenge, but from an almost sacred need for truth. I realized my journey was not just about discovering an unknown brother. It was about dismantling a family system built on omissions and lies. Every piece of evidence I collected empowered me a little more, transforming my initial pain into an unstoppable force for revelation. Truth would no longer be negotiable. It would be exposed, raw and unfiltered, without mercy. A confrontation. Scene unfolded in the living room of my parents' old home. The silence was thick, almost palpable. My father, Charles, sat in his usual chair, trying to maintain composure, but his eyes revealed the terror of being unmasked. "I want the truth, Dad. All of it," I said, my voice initially trembling but gaining strength with each word. My body shook not from fear, but from a surgical rage that wholly consumed me. Charles tried to start an elaborate speech, the kind full of the usual roundabout explanations he would use to escape. I quickly interrupted him. "Enough with the lies. I want to know about the son you had with Juliana." The impact was immediate. His face drained of color. His hands began to tremble slightly on the arms of the chair. I realized I would no longer be the submissive son swallowing whatever was thrown at me. Every lie would be exposed. Every secret brought to light. "How did you find out?" he murmured, more to himself than to me. My smile was cutting. "It doesn't matter how. What matters is that I know everything." Irony dripped from every syllable. Years of manipulation were about to crumble. I began to lay out the evidence I had collected. Documents, photos, snippets of emails. Each element was a surgical strike against the family theater he had built. Charles tried to argue, but his explanations sounded weaker by the moment. "Do you think you can build a life of lies and I'll stay quiet?" I shot back. My voice no longer trembled. It was pure determination. The confrontation morphed into a silent courtroom, where I was simultaneously judge, prosecutor, and injured party. Each revelation did not destroy me, but reconstructed me. The initial pain was replaced by an unstoppable energy for justice. "I didn't come here to destroy," I said finally. "I came to expose the truth, and the truth always finds its way." Charles was defeated, not by the revelation itself, but by the strength with which I faced the entire situation. No longer was I the son he controlled, but a man determined to rewrite his own story. Truth would no longer be negotiable. It would be exposed, raw and unfiltered, without mercy. The escalation of conflict unfolded like a complex web of secrets and manipulations. After the initial shock, I realized I could no longer remain passive in the face of so many lies. My father, Charles, tried to minimize the situation, using the same authoritative tone as always, as if he could simply sweep the truth under the rug. Every attempt he made to control the narrative only increased my determination. I began to collect evidence with almost surgical precision. Discrete documents, intercepted conversations, knowing glances, all transformed into ammunition to uncover the truth. The small town, once my refuge of safety, now seemed like a stage where I was preparing my grand revelation. Juliana, my ex-friend, oscillated between fear and guilt. Our encounters became a tense dance, where every word revealed more than she would have liked. I realized she was also trapped in a web of silences and omissions, but that wouldn't sway me. I wanted answers, not compassion. Conversations with my father turned into true battlefields. Each question was a wedge I inserted into the cracks of his false narrative. I observed how he averted his gaze, how his hands trembled slightly when I touched on sensitive topics. I was no longer the submissive son accepting crumbs of explanation. I realized my family was an elaborate theater of lies, where each character played a carefully constructed role. Details emerged like fragments of a twisted puzzle. A photo here, a comment there, documents discreetly stored. Everything began to make sense. Truth would no longer be negotiable. It would be exposed, raw and unfiltered, without mercy. My initial pain transformed into an unrelenting energy for justice. I would no longer be the passive victim of a story that had been hidden from me. I had become the hunter of truths. Charles tried to calm me with weak arguments, typical of someone who always believed he could manipulate the facts. "Son, not everything is as it seems," he would say, with that voice that once intimidated me. Today, those words sounded like a bad joke. The investigation became my obsession. Every detail, every silent moment, now took on new meanings. I transformed my pain into fuel to uncover the truth that had been stolen from me for years. No longer would I be the son who swallowed lies. I would be responsible for bringing all the truth to light, no matter who got hurt in the process. I realized my journey was about more than discovering an unknown brother. It was about dismantling a family system built on omissions and lies. Every piece of evidence I collected empowered me, transforming my initial vulnerability into an unstoppable force for revelation. The family theater was on the verge of collapse, and I would be the director of this long-silenced play of truths. The room was completely silent when I decided to expose all the truth. My entire family was gathered, curious and anxious gazes present. Charles was trying to maintain his composure, but his hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Today, you will all learn the truth that was stolen from me for years," I declared, my voice firm and cutting like a blade. I spread the evidence I had collected across the table: photos, documents, emails, irrefutable proof of my father's betrayal with Juliana. I began narrating every detail, every lie. I saw shock and discomfort in my family members' eyes. Charles tried to interrupt me, but I silenced him with a gesture. I would no longer be the submissive son swallowing lies. "This is my brother," I said, revealing a photo. "A child you hid from me all these years." Juliana's head dropped, unable to meet my gaze. My father tried to argue, but his words sounded empty, frail attempts to justify years of deception. The tension was palpable. Each revelation was like a bomb that shattered the facade of the perfect family they had created. It was no longer about pain. It was about justice. Each secret I exposed liberating me, making me stronger. I finished my exposé with surgical clarity. "No more lies," I stated. "The truth always finds its way." The silence that followed was deafening. The family meeting exploded into a storm of emotions. My shout for truth pierced through the hypocritical silence that had always suffocated us. Every person present felt the weight of the revelations, as if my voice carried an energy capable of dismantling decades of lies. Charles tried to argue, his hands trembling, revealing more vulnerability than his words. Juliana, in turn, seemed frozen, her face a mask of guilt and fear. The room was divided. Some relatives looked at me in shock, while others expressed a mix of sympathy and disapproval. "Enough of pretending," I declared, my voice firm cutting through the heavy air. "Did you think you could hide this truth forever?" Each word was a targeted strike against the family facade they built. I was no longer the submissive son, but someone determined to expose the truth without mercy. Whispers began to circulate, speculations and whispered judgments among relatives. I realized my revelation did not just expose the secret of Charles and Juliana, but challenged the entire structure of family relationships that kept us trapped. My unknown brother, who until then had just been an abstraction, became real in that moment. His eyes, which met mine for the first time, carried the same confusion and pain I felt. We were victims of a family theater built on lies. Reactions varied. My mother, initially in shock, began to process the betrayal with a mix of anger and sadness. Aunts and cousins divided between silent support and visible discomfort. The truth, when finally exposed, had a devastating power to reconfigure relationships. Charles tried to argue, his voice choked by contained emotions, but his explanations sounded like empty excuses, fragile attempts to justify years of deception. Each phrase he uttered confirmed how deep the betrayal was. Juliana remained silent, her body tense as if awaiting judgment. And in a way, she was being judged, not only by me but by everyone present. Decades of friendship and complicity dissolved in that moment of brutal honesty. The meeting did not end with instant reconciliations or easy forgiveness. It ended with a cutting clarity. The truth, no matter how painful, needed to be voiced. Each person present would need to rethink their concepts of family, trust, and loyalty. I left that room feeling something within me had changed forever. I was no longer the hostage of family lies, but the architect of my own truth. The initial pain transformed into strength, silence into voice, and submission into freedom. The family we once knew died that day, and in its place, something new, unpredictable, and true was born. Time revealed the true meaning of family to me. Months after that explosive revelation, I realized that healing was not about hiding wounds, but exposing them with courage. Charles, my father, now tried to rebuild our relationship with timid gestures and honest conversations. The brother I had never known became a tangible reality, no longer a ghost hidden in the sidelines of untold stories. Our family dynamic was now a delicate territory of silent negotiations. Each encounter was a dance of attempts, where we all walked on emotional shards of glass. I learned that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, but understanding that people are complex, with their own fragilities and shames. The boy, my half-brother, was more than a revealed secret. He was a real person, with feelings, stories, and an identity that needed to be respected. Our first meetings were awkward, laden with heavy silences and furtive glances, but gradually, we discovered points of connection, quick conversations that slowly turned into genuine discussions. Charles seemed to be in a silent penance. His eyes, once confident and authoritative, now bore a vulnerability I had never seen. He tried to atone for years of lies with simple gestures, dinner invitations, surprise phone calls, honest attempts at closeness. And I, who had been consumed by anger, began to understand that true strength was in the ability to rebuild rather than destroy. Juliana remained on the periphery of this new family configuration. Our relationship was now a landscape of distant cordiality, punctuated by polite greetings and awkward smiles. The betrayal still hurt, but it no longer consumed me as it once did. I realized that family is not a rigid concept, but a living organism that adapts and transforms. Every revealed lie had been a brick removed from an old structure, allowing for the construction of something more transparent, more authentic. Today, I look at this story not as a tragedy, but as a journey of redefinition. I learned that the truth, no matter how painful, always liberates us. That forgiving does not mean forgetting, but understanding the imperfect humanity within each of us. Life continues, with its unexpected twists and profound lessons, and I stand here, no longer as the victim of an untold story, but as the author of my own narrative of healing and hope. The pain of familial lies taught me that truth is not just a word, but liberation. Every revealed secret was a step toward my reconstruction. I learned that family is not blood, but choice. My father, Charles, Juliana, all were characters in a story I rewrote with courage. The scar remains, but no longer as a wound. Now it serves as a mark of resilience,